This is the Vatic Pro Oni. This is their attempt at a foam core style paddle to keep up with the wild power that is being introduced into the game. However, there might be a catch that will make you think twice about buying one. So let's talk about it. Okay, so originally I was supposed to have this review out on launch day, but the day before it was supposed to go out, we actually realized my Oni Flash was broken. Or was it? I'm gonna preface this section of the video with, I do not know if this is going to be a long-term or common issue for Vatic, but I have enough experience or history with paddles that are built similar to have suspicions about how this is going to play out. When I first got the Oni, I didn't notice anything crazy in terms of pop or power. It felt like a good paddle that had solid plow through, but definitely not Gen 3 level pop or power. I would have put it on par with a Gen 2. As I continued to use it for the next week, I noticed it was hitting harder and harder. Now, with foam core paddles, this is not uncommon. It's what everyone refers to as the break-in period. Eventually, it got to a point where I could hardly even drop the ball with this thing. I'll put some clips on screen now of a drill session, and you can see that I'm getting absolutely destroyed on shots that should be very easy to drop. For several days, I genuinely wondered if I was just awful at pickleball. Dinking was difficult, serve returns were sailing way long, and thirds were really high. Then I started hitting it side by side with the Gen 3 Joola 16mm models, and noticed that I had a much easier time controlling those, even though when I was doing that review, they were on the harder side of paddles for me to use. Then I tried going back to a Gen 2 paddle, and everything was way easier and things felt very consistent again. Eventually, we did the common test where you press your hands into the paddle for core crushing, and we noticed that we could hear the foam squishing. It wasn't actually the crackling noise that you hear from the core crushing, but just a very faint mush noise that you can listen to here. Thankfully, we had a second Oni Flash to compare, and the difference in power was night and day. So we cut open a non-broken V7 Oni and my broken Flash, and you can see how much more flex the core has on the broken one, while the non-broken V7 has almost zero flex to it. After cutting those open, I immediately started testing another Oni Flash this past Tuesday. Before I hit them, I verified by pressing my hand all over the face that there was zero flex, zero crunch, and no mushy foam noise. Within literally 4 play sessions, from Tuesday afternoon to Thursday afternoon, it has already changed drastically and now feels much more springy and has way more pop and power than it did on the first session. During some of those 4 play sessions, I could literally feel the paddle getting hotter in between games. I'm also able to hear the foam compressing noise when I press around the face, though it's not nearly as obvious as my original one was. My guess is a few more days of play testing and it would get right to where my other one was. I think what is happening is that the foam is compromising the polymer core, which is giving more flex in the face, and when you press into it, you're able to squish the foam down. Whereas when it's brand new, the polymer is mostly rigid and you can't press down on the foam. Once the polymer cells give out, you're able to squish both at the same time, which creates a bigger trampoline effect. Also notice a few things in these images. First, you can tell in certain areas that the core is slightly crushed. Having small wrinkles in the core is not a good sign. Also, notice on my broken in one how much more expanded the foam is compared to the V7 that was barely used. I don't know whether this is from foam expanding from use or if it came with this much variance from the factory. Either way, both things are not ideal to see. Now, this is clearly not something you want your paddle to be doing, right? Well, I spoke to Vatic and they basically told me that all of this is intentional with the design. It's meant to loosen up as you use it and give you more flex in the core/foam to add more power. Vatic also claims that the factory did a 5,000 hit test with one of their machines, then tested for deflection and passed. I can't personally verify those results, so take it for whatever it's worth to you. Here's my problem with all of this. Universally, pressing into your paddle and hearing a crunch or squishing noise for the entire last year has been a bad thing that meant your paddle was out of spec. Now we're able to advertise it as a feature or selling point. Can you imagine if last year every company advertised core crushing as a selling point? This also leads me into my next talking point, which is that foam core paddles might just be inherently flawed. The Gearbox Pro Power has a break-in period where it continues to get hotter, and that has a lot of foam in the core. This new Vatic also has a lot of foam in the area of the sweet spot and has the same type of break-in period. Joola has foam in the core, and also has a break-in period where the paddle continues to get hotter. Then maybe you've heard of a company called Cortec and wondered why I haven't reviewed it. I was sent units earlier this year, but within just a few days, the foam in the polymer cells was either overstuffed or started overflowing out of the cells, and you could press into the face and hear the foam squishing. The paddle also started hitting way harder than it did out of the box. Someone's also going to have to explain this rule in the USAP rulebook to me. Springs or spring-like material, flexible membranes, or any compressible material that creates a trampoline effect. This is listed in the section of the rules for things that are not allowed in a paddle. We literally have companies advertising a trampoline effect in their marketing material, and somehow these are still passing. It blows my mind that we can have several of these paddles on the market, and USAP just doesn't seem to care. So I've seen enough foam core style paddles now to suspect that the manufacturing process needs to change drastically, or this style of paddle is flawed and isn't going to work long term. Both of my Oni Flashes changed a lot from their stock form into something that is on par with a Gen 3 Joola, if not slightly more powerful. My second Oni V7, which hasn't even been used for an entire game yet, already has a maraca-like sound in the core. Now, usually this wouldn't bother me. It's often just loose glue that doesn't impact anything, but combine that with the other concerns I have, and now I'm severely questioning the durability of this design. So I guess for now, we have to take their word about these staying compliant, but if history of paddles has taught me anything, squishing and crunching noises are never a good sign. All right, that was a mouthful. If you've made it this far, we're gonna start actually talking about the paddle performance and specs now, but I thought it was really important to put that disclaimer about what I experienced with this paddle. Moving forward, I will be reviewing this paddle from the perspective of my first Oni, which had a full week of break-in. With the early signs of how much my second one is loosening up, I'm very confident that it's headed in the same exact direction as my first one. I won't be talking much about the initial feel out of the box because so far I found that within 1 to 2 days of playing, that feeling goes away completely. All I will say is out of the box is that this paddle was very average and underwhelming. It feels solid, more muted, and average pop or power. There was nothing to rave about, but it wasn't a bad paddle. Basically a less stiff version of the original orange Vatic Pros. However, that all changes very quickly. The Vatic Pro Oni can be purchased for $159.99, and with code PBStudio, you can save $10 on your order. For this initial launch, Vatic has been doing a limited run of this design with a dragon on it, and apparently all of these units have already sold out. So if you're watching this video on the day it comes out, you may have to wait for the regular design models to go up for order before you can buy one. At the time of this launch, there are 2 models that you can purchase: the Oni V7 SH and Oni Flash SH. SH stands for short handle, and these are the same exact lengths as the previous orange-colored Vatic paddles. In the future, Vatic is also going to release a Flash LH and V7 LH, which stands for long handle. My review is going to be focusing on the Oni Flash SH. Largely, the Flash and V7 are going to be very similar, except that the V7 has a higher swing weight, around 119 to 121, and the Flash is 114 to 117. In the time that I did spend with the V7, I found it to be heavier than I prefer, but that just means it has more plow through on the ball, which some of you might actually like. I don't think there's a large difference between them outside of the swing weights that they have. So the one that you choose will largely depend on your shape preferences between elongated and hybrid, and then swing weight that you want from your paddle. Vatic Pro has also updated their warranty from 3 months to 6 months this year, so that's a nice plus to see, but you might be using that warranty more with some of the early issues that I'm seeing. If you've heard the new Joola, you're probably very familiar with the thunk or thump sound that it makes rather than the tink or higher pitched noise that we're used to. The feel and sound of the Vatic Oni sits between a Gen 2 thermoformed paddle and the new Gen 3 Joolas. It's not quite that really deep thunk, but it's also a bit different of a sound than the Gen 2s. One of the very big differences between the Oni and the new Joolas is the Oni doesn't feel as stiff and hollow as the Joola. The feel is more dense, muted, and springy on the Oni. I've let quite a few people hit the Oni, and many of them found the feel off the face to be more enjoyable than the Joola. With the Oni, or really any of these Gen 3 style paddles, you will be rewarded the harder you can swing. So if you can't generate your own power, you might find that it isn't as powerful as some paddles that are really poppy out of the box. The more you can give these foam core style paddles, the more you get out of them at an exponential rate. With a traditional paddle, you can put in X amount of power or effort yourself, and you can expect to get Y amount of output. With these foam core style paddles, I can put 20% on a swing and get 30% output. But then on another swing at 50%, I might be getting what feels like 70% output. Those aren't exact numbers. I'm just trying to convey the feel that I have had playing with this style of paddle. Currently, it seems that these foam core style paddles have the potential to give you more power when they are thicker. My current thought is because with more foam, there's more chance for the trampoline effect to be bigger compared to when there's less foam. So you're rewarded the more you can give the paddle, but I find it comes at the cost that it might make your shot a little less predictable. I particularly noticed this issue with serve returns, resets, and dinks on the Oni. I never felt very confident in my dinking because I just couldn't figure out how much I was able to swing and get the ball to do what I wanted without popping up too high and giving someone an attackable ball. I was also a bit more hesitant, which made me feel like I couldn't play the game that I actually wanted to play. As I played with it, I consistently found myself thinking about what I thought the paddle might do on certain shots, which just led to me not being able to focus on actually playing the game. So just know that there may be an adjustment period that you aren't used to with this type of paddle, especially since over the first week of play, it's going to change a lot. If you've already tried and really enjoyed a 16mm Gen 3 Joola, then you might have less of an issue with the adjustment period. Now, what might be very annoying is that during this break-in period, you may find that you are very happy with how it plays, and then it may continue to change after that. On my second Oni, I actually really liked how it was feeling after the first 2 sessions, but then by 3 and 4, it got loose enough to where I just couldn't do what I wanted with it. So if you want your paddle to act the same all the time, then all of these Gen 3 paddles might not be the ones for you. As far as pop goes, once it reached the break-in stage, I found it was at least on par with the Gen 3 Joolas, if not even maybe a little bit more. The sweet spot is interesting to describe on the Oni. While the twist weight numbers are more than reasonable, I think this new core design comes with a few drawbacks for the sweet spot. It doesn't feel very consistent, or it's different depending on where you hit it. This is likely because the foam doesn't go throughout the entire core. So certain areas are getting partially foam and partially polymer. Especially on the edges of the paddle, I found that the ball reacted completely different. This is likely because instead of the ball getting pocketed by several coils of foam and rebounding off, you have less coils on one side of the ball if you hit near the edge, and it doesn't rebound as much. If you rarely miss the center, this obviously isn't going to matter much. Overall, I found the sweet spot of Gen 2 paddles to be much more consistent throughout the face than I have with these Gen 3 style cores. This is probably the most complicated ending to a review that I have had to try and write. I genuinely don't know whether this is an incredible top tier paddle or a near flop. On the one hand, it's a fantastic power paddle with an appealing feel off the face that is almost half the price of the new Joolas after it breaks in. In this way, it's extremely appealing to spend far less money and achieve power that we have only seen come from a few expensive paddles in the industry. If what you want is a rocket launcher that has a bit of an inconsistent sweet spot, and you're okay with being a bit of a guinea pig in terms of how this durability shakes out, then sure, try this paddle. It's a lot of fun, hits hard, and there's a lot of people who tried mine that really liked the feel compared to the new Gen 3 Joolas. But on the other hand, a bunch of companies basically gaslit reviewers early last year saying that core crushing is only a small amount of paddles and barely impacts anyone. And then we've proceeded to see those issues exist almost a full year later. I'm hesitant to believe that this is a one-off issue that won't be more common with these foam-filled cores, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. If you're comfortable with taking a chance on the new design, then this paddle performs exceptionally well in the power department. But if I was going out right now and spending my own money to buy a paddle, I wouldn't buy one of these. At least not without a much larger track record of how it's going to act over the next month or two. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.